Bonus segment for Clan Collection again, this time for Nubatama, Dudley, and also Bermuda Triangle with a surprising grade 4. So let's begin. So we start off with the new Nubatama cards. Here's the Heel Guardian and reprints. And then we go to Martial Artist of Acceleration Houzan. Grade 1, AK Power and Skills. Auto, when placed on Vanguard, look at top 7 cards in your deck, search for a grade 2 or greater Houzan card, and put it to your hand. Yes, your grade 2 and your grade 3 are also Houzan, so essentially this is searching for your main grade 2 or grade 3. But anyway, second skill. At the end of the battle that this card attacked or boosted, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and return it to the hand. Now this deck's playstyle focuses on bouncing your opponent's rear guards, but Nubatama in general has a hand destruction playstyle where, as long as they have a big hand, you can destroy their hand, thus also triggering more abilities. And for Houzan's case, you want to make your opponent to choose whether they want to keep their big hand or make a big field presence. But of course this is nothing too special other than for Houzan. Next, Master Swordman of the Successes Victory Houzan. Grade 2, 9 power and skills. Auto Vanguard Rearguard. When this card attacks the Vanguard, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and return it to the hand. And if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 2 or greater, this card gets plus 10k power to the end of that battle. Like I said, Nubatama in general destroys big hands, although it can backfire for returning them. But this skill is pretty nice for being a big beater. It can be a nice trade-off as well, especially when it causes no counter blasts. But anyway, its second skill is where it's much more devastating. Auto, when rolled upon by a grade 3, if your opponent has 3 or more rearguards, choose one of your vanguards that gets plus crit +1 and dry +1. The condition of having your opponent to have at least 3 rearguards should not be difficult, because against Nubatama, they don't want to keep a big hand size, because the bigger their hand is, it'll be easier for them to destroy their hand. So now with this skill, if your opponent decides to call a bunch of stuff, well, you just get a benefit too. Especially when both skills are essentially free already. Yes, the bounce back to your opponent can still hurt you, but it's a playstyle where your opponent really has to think whether they want to keep their big hand size or not. So yeah, definitely very good. Now to the new boss unit, Sword Saint of Invincibility, Dai Houzan. Grade 3, Protect, 12k power and skills. Auto Vanguard. When this card attacks the Vanguard, cost counter blast 1, soul blast 1, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and return it to the hand. And then to the end of the battle, this card gets plus 5k power and 1 drive. And if your opponent's at least at grade 3, while they have 1 or less rear guards, it gets an additional plus 10k and 1 crit. So yeah, like I said, make the choice between having a big hand or have a big field presence. Which of course in my case, I would rather have the big field presence if I were the opponent, because I would like to take advantage of the new cards of bouncing my cards back to my hand for the shield value, and just by making your field small already makes this card pretty powerful. Especially with its second skill, Auto Vanguard. When your opponent calls a normal unit during their turn, and their hand is 4 or more cards, your opponent must choose a card from their hand and discard it. So like I said, encouraging your opponent to have a small hand size. But what I really like about this second skill is that, as long as your opponent calls a normal unit, even their battle phase, if they have a big hand size, they still have to discard. So yeah, the more cards they call, the more cards that they have to discard. If they have a big hand anyway. So yeah, overall this deck's playstyle really only focuses on encouraging your opponent to have a small hand size, and if your opponent decides to save their hand for a big turn, that's gonna punish them. And like what we saw with the grade 2 earlier, combo this with its first skill, if you can pull off its full value, well this will be at least 27k, 3 crits, and 4 drive checks. Yeah, that's already insane, and you also have a guard restricted Nubatama as well. And now if your opponent still decides to have a big ass hand for some reason, well, Jamia Congo exists. So yeah, an overall interesting and fun deck. And now for the Dudley stuff, Heel Guardian plus reprints. And now we go to Dudley Daisy. Grade 1, 8 power and skills. Auto, when placed on rearguard by card ability of a Dudley card, costs Soul Blast 1, search your deck for 1 grade 3 Dudley and call it to open rearguard. And then at the end of the turn, put that card to the bottom of the deck. Well, Spike Brothers in general has a playstyle of returning cards back to the deck in mid-battle and then calling more cards on top of it. And they also have Force Marker moving. So calling this card is not a bad target, especially with its skill comboing with that to call a grade 3, which you want to mainly call Dudley Lucifer for its countercharge and soul charge. So overall, pretty nice. Next, Dudley Mason. Grade 2, tank your power and skills. Auto rearguard when this card attack hits. If your Vanguard is Dudley, cost counterblast 1. Put this to the bottom of the deck, search your deck for one Dudley from hand and call it. Another one of those attack hit pressure cards, but my main gripe about this is that you have to call from hand. If it gives you additional draw, that would have been much better, especially with the fact that it has to attack hit. But anyway, second skill, auto. When put to your deck from rearguard during your turn, choose one of your units and move all force markers to that circle. So yeah, like I said, Spike Brothers has a playstyle where you move force markers, aka passing the football. Overall, I could only say this is okay, mainly for its second skill. The first skill is more of an attack pressure card which can trigger the second skill, but you do have other cards that can move your rearguard back to the bottom of the deck, thus triggering its second skill to move the force markers, which of course will be very helpful, especially with the return of our great Emperor, Demonic Lord Dudley Emperor. Grade 3, 13 power, force, and skills. Auto, when attacks from Vanguard or rode upon, cost counterblast 1, search your deck for one grade 2 or greater Dudley, and call it to rearguard. Which of course you do have some Dudley cards when they're called, ability activates, and even call even more cards because of those calls. So yeah, you have that. And then choose one of your Vanguards and it gets plus 10k power into the end of the turn. This is basically here because it's when this card attacks or when rode upon, so it also has some pseudo break ride skill, which I didn't expect with Dudley Emperor, but overall this skill is not too bad. Definitely better than Lucifer because Lucifer has a call from hand. This one can call from deck, which is of course more consistent, and like I said, you can combo this with other on-place abilities, which of course some of them will have more calls, like Mason, which of course will call grade 3. But anyway, its second skill also helps out a lot, because auto Vanguard rearguard. When your rearguard attacks, if your Vanguard is Dudley, so meaning no Rising Nova, that rearguard gets plus 5k power to the end of that battle, and then at the end of the battle, put that to the bottom of the deck. So yeah, if your rearguards can't put themselves at the bottom of the deck, well this card can do that for you. And it's also nice that this can work on rearguard as well, giving you more playability. And like I mentioned earlier, that grade 2 wants to be moved back to the bottom of the deck so it could trigger its second skill to move the force markers, which of course will increase Spike Brothers' power even more. So yeah, overall, very needed for the Dudley archetype, because they were short on cards. And now to Bermudas. Here's the Heel Guardian along with reprints. And then we go to Reliable Faith Lucilos, grade 1, 80 power, and its skill is Count Rearguard Guardian. If you have 2 or more force markers, this card gets 5k power and 5k shield. Bermudas have force marker generation, so this is pretty generic for any Bermuda deck, especially for this new boss unit as well. But anyway, second skill, Count Rearguard. If you have 3 or more force markers, this card can intercept from the back row. Very generic Bermuda card. Just play this in any force marker acceleration deck. And into one of the new boss units, which is a grade 4, Miracle Cycle Etrokia. Grade 4, 14k power, force, and its skill is Auto Vanguard. Once per turn at the end of the battle that this card attacks, choose 3 normal units from Rearguard and Drop Zone. If 6 were chosen with different names, stand this unit, and then put the chosen cards at the bottom of the deck in any order. So 1, it's nice that you can recycle, 2, it's a restander, and 3, it's pretty generic, and the condition isn't really that hard. I mean, it's 6 normal units with different names, which is better with Highlander of course, but overall it isn't bad. Sure, it's still a grade 4, but luckily this is a grade 4 that you can reuse every single turn. And finally, Single Quiet Refiarade. Grade 3, Force, 13k power, and its skill is Act Vanguard once per turn, costs counterblast 1, discard a card from hand, rest this unit, so it has to be in the main phase, perform all the following abilities. If you have 4 or less force markers, get 2 imaginary gift force, because of course. Reveal the same number of cards from the top of your deck up to the number of rearguards with force markers and put them to your hand, and you can also activate all trigger abilities. So essentially, you're sacrificing your Vanguard attack to put a bunch of force markers and also doing your drive checks early. So basically you're getting a pseudo triple drive before the battle phase. You get 1 from its ride, and then you get 2 more gift markers from its skill. So that's already 3 right there. Yes, it is a sacrifice of the Vanguard attack, but luckily you could get more attacks from it, because its second skill, Count Vanguard. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, all grade 2 or less units and your rearguard with force markers can attack from the back row. So essentially, you're sacrificing your Vanguard's attack to give more rearguards to attack with. Now, I don't like the Force Marker Acceleration because I really don't like those decks, and they're permanent 10Ks each, keep that in mind. But for the trade-off, that's quite insane, because first off, the first skill will generate you on your first ride at least 3 Force Markers, and then if you add it with the second time you use it, that'll be 5. Once you hit 5, you're not going to get any more from its first skill, but you can still get its pseudo drive checks, which at that point that's 5 pseudo drive checks. Yeah, quite insane right there. Although keep in mind, since you do lose a Vanguard attack, you do lose that pressure of how many triggers to pass from a guard. And since this card gives you access for back row attacks for grade 2 or less units, that will be at most 20k each, because they have to have a force marker, meaning things can still be stopped by one trigger if you do not get those pseudo drive checks with triggers normally. But you could also go for the force 2 play if you can generate power with 5 attacks with crit of 2 each. So yes, you can do that too. But overall, it's very nice. It's a rearguard reliant deck, so keep that in mind. So if there's a deck that nukes your rearguards, well, you might be screwed. So that's it for these archetypes. What do you guys think about the new Nubatama, Dudley, and Bermuda cards? Nubatama is quite interesting because, of course, you're bouncing your opponent's card back to their hand, giving them a bigger hand size, so then you can easily destroy their hand. And also all the insane combos that you can go for insane power with guard restriction crits and drive checks. So it's quite interesting. It's just very needed Dudley support as it is, and I'm glad to see the Emperor back. And then for Bermuda. Bermuda's Bermuda, more generation of Force Marker because they always get the strong shit. So that's it for these archetypes, and now it's time to say goodbye.